All right, everybody, welcome back to another Future Focused, where we are living at the intersection of business technology and the human experience. I am looking forward to today's discussion, as I always am, because I'm digging into one of my favorite topics, which is flexible working. And what does that even mean? How do you really pull it off? And what does it look like in practice, which is often far, far more complicated than meets the eye. The whole kind of public conversation of, shells lobbing across the bow of, well, it's remote or it's in office, it just doesn't really give enough color to the conversation. So I thought I'd have that conversation live here. And if you missed the whole thing, be sure to check the Substack for some of my biggest takeaways. But live, I'm going to be talking with Nik Froehlich, who is the CEO of, I hit the mute button, Saritasa, right? I want to make sure, first of all, I forgot before I hit go live that I pronounced your last name right. So I want to confirm that. And then I got the company right.
Saritasa.
Saritasa. Okay. And is it Froehlich? Did I get it right?
Froehlich.
Froehlich. All right. All
close.
right, Nik.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Acceptable.
Pretty close.
Definitely better than some of the names I've butchered in the past. No, and so what's going to be fun about this conversation is, so you're the CEO of a medium-sized tech company, and you've been on this journey yourself. Kind of went through the whole pandemic era of, well, we've got to kind of flip the remote switch. Now we're kind of coming back through it, and it's been a journey for you. And so I was really looking forward to digging into what that journey's looked like and just kind of pushing on each other a little bit in terms of how that actually works out in practice, to hopefully illustrate for people the complexity behind it that I think a lot of employees and sometimes employers just don't recognize. But before we do, I've gotten to know you through this process. Other people probably haven't. So a little bit of background into you and who you are and how you ended up running the company you do now.
Sure. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to, I'm the son of immigrants. My parents immigrated from Germany. They landed in Southern California in Orange County. Not speaking the language, but they brought with them that the can-do work culture with them. And after high school, I said, I'm going to go to college. And they said, why are you going to go to college? Are you going to be a doctor or a lawyer? I said, well, I don't know, but everybody goes to college.
Yeah, isn't that what you do?
Is that what you do? They go, well, no, you got to learn a trade. You got to do something. I mean, we're immigrants. We're blue collar. You're not. I'm like, wow. So anyway, I ended up, my brother that's a couple years younger than me, he was doing some, they call it concrete grinding. Basically, you grind down a sidewalk so you don't trip on it. Anyway, I said, look, I'll get the work for you. You do the work. So that was my first foray into out of blue collar. Nice. So I could do something. So I was in the service industry for about, ran that for about 18, 20 years. It enabled me to buy a computer, Macintosh, and start using tech. And I ended up opening up branches all across the US. And I just, really got to use a computer for work. And it was really great. And then that slowly led to me, because I could use technology to help businesses, moving away from that, sold that to my brother, and I opened up the consulting business, which basically provides custom software development for businesses.
So I have to ask though. So first of all, I think it's awesome that your journey was, you in many ways, especially based on the timing of this, were an early adopter of the tech in a probably non-tech focused industry. I think concrete grinding, that's not necessarily one where you go, you know what we need? Computers to grow this business. So you saw that and went, I think we can do more with this. So that already tells me a little bit about who you are. But then as that grew, to jump from that to, you know what, I should have a software company, when that's not even like, that's a pretty impressive story.
Well,
and how did you crack that code? Because I mean, did you know how to code? Or like,
no,
how did you go? I'm going to build software. I've never built it, but it's not like you're hammering nails and wood together.
I built a database, a drag and drop database off of Helix that was available for Macintosh. So I learned relational databases, but not the code level.
Okay. No, but you understood the basics of computer science and how it worked.
Right. It was a custom CRM. It ran my company, everything, every order in, mailing list. And this was back fax machines.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, way back, dial-up modem. I mean, there was no email and stuff. It was self-contained. So anyway, um, and because I was doing that and I understood it, and I started helping other business owners, smaller businesses,
Okay.
I knew enough to help them get over the step. And then, I reversed engineered some HTML a little bit, but I'm not a coder.
Okay.
I took BASIC in high school when it came out.
No, but you to me actually embody what I think makes a great technologist, which is you understood the business challenges and you understood the basics and the foundations of technology, and then combine the two to go, you know what, if I reverse engineer or structure this way, I can actually solve a business challenge, and technology is the answer to do it.
That was the entire premise of the new company, because I would hire freelancers to build. So I knew the business side. I was a businessman first. I was a salesman, a businessman, and those challenges, I knew what those were. I also knew the language of programmers.
Yeah.
I used to joke, they sit in a cave somewhere, right? And they do their stuff. I don't mean to, that's me. But if you ask them to build something, you're going to get it, but you're going to get literally what you ask them, and it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. I learned how to speak the language and know enough to talk to a developer.
It's like being multilingual. It actually is like being multilingual. You actually have to be able to translate requirements and then translate them over to technical speak, because otherwise, if you just take requirements and hand them, you'll get what you asked for.
Oh, yeah, but
what you asked for is not actually going to be the solution to the problem.
I agree. So I figured that every business will eventually have to deal with technology. Every business will eventually at some point. Secondly, technology will, so there's a demand, and the demand will always grow, and technology will always change. So the amount of growth and the amount of demand and the amount of need for this just keeps on growing. So that's a good business to be in. Yeah. And I don't think the CEOs and the decision makers are ever going to be able to speak the language of programmers. And the more technical it gets, and the more brilliant the engineers are, and the more brilliant the CEOs are,
the more the language gap grows.
It is, right. So all you do is, we just built that in between piece. And we keep we speak business to our clients, and we treat and we speak computer to our engineers. And, it's our philosophies. They're just as important. So, an engineer wants to get off a project because they're tired of it. We take them off the project, and the CEO goes, no, don't take him off. He's the best. He goes, if I keep him on, you're going to lose him. Now I'm going to lose him.
Right.
No.
Right. And then they're not going to be the best anymore.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, that was kind of the genesis of the whole deal. And then it just, I've been doing it for 18 years now. It's just grown. And, I focus on the client, the demand, what they're looking for. And, at the same time, the right people, and which is kind of a segue to our conversation.
Well, and I think, exactly. But the backstory, I think, helps a lot, because I think it also should be an encouragement to anybody who watches or listens to this, the fact that I continue, and if you look back at previous guests I've had over the last 5 years, some of the best technology leaders I've interacted with, they are not what you would picture as the stereotypical technologist. In fact, a lot of times they have bent the rules in many ways, and that's actually what has made them uniquely gifted at the way they lead, because it's not. And so I think sometimes people are like, oh, I could never be good at technology because I'm not a programmer. And I'm like, actually, that might make you a better technologist because you're able to see it through a different lens. So I think it's awesome. Okay. So then you're running a technology company. So from concrete upbringings to technology company, which I love that. Then you're hit in 2020 with the same thing most every other company is, which, how big were you at the time? Like, how many people did you have when COVID hit?
Well, in the
and were they local? Were they all kind of like clustered together?
So we immediately prior to that, we decided to expand. So we were just in Southern California.
So you just expanded.
About a year and a half prior. So, and by the way, every single client we had would come into the office and meet. We didn't do work for anybody that wasn't local. Our office was staffed
Okay.
every day. Everybody comes in at
So that was part of
8.
the ethos of the company.
It was. We wouldn't even consider taking on a client unless they walked in the office. We had 6 conference rooms that were full of people. I mean,
Okay.
this was and it's part of, because I don't think the clients they need to know who they hired.
Yeah.
Because it's software. We don't know these people. When they walked into
Or
our
we're
office,
trusting them to build us custom software for our business,
which is
we
not
need to
tangible.
believe. Yes.
They
yes.
can't look at it. They can't look at the progress. They can't see anything. So it's a trusted relationship. So
yeah, there's no crate that shows up on your driveway and goes, there, we made the product. And you go, oh, you know what? It looks up to my specifications.
Right. So we felt like we really maximized our advertising and everything in that area. We work in Los Angeles, so we would drive out there so we could see it. But we said, okay, let's replicate this. Where do we replicate? Let's go to New York. So we got an office in New York, and I had 3 of my best people relocate and to New York, and hired 2 people there. I flew out for 2 weeks in a row and then back. So I was doing for about a year, 2 years, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. And so we were replicating the model. Again, meet the people. They come into the office, the whole thing. And everybody comes into the office, no matter what. One guy commuted in hour and a half every day on the train because he lived out in Jersey. And it was maybe he wouldn't have to come in on a Friday if there were no appointments.
Okay.
So that
again, what you've described is it was part of the company, in many ways, even just company brand. I mean, it was part of the brand you had created. It was like, well, this is who we are. This is how we work with our customers. This is everything.
We had a massage room, and everybody got the perk of massages. We had a ping pong table and always had tournaments going on. Lunch almost every other day in the kitchen, and everybody, I mean, we were, I mean,
it was part of the culture. It was part of the culture.
It absolutely was. I mean, it's full.
So 2020 hits, and you got a company that you just expanded.
And it's illegal. It's illegal.
It's illegal to come into a building together.
Yeah. Illegal. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. So
how did you respond to that? Because I mean, here you got you're a technology company, and I think a lot of people just assumes that, well, technology companies have this stuff all figured out. And I've know a lot of technology companies and worked with a lot of technology, and it's like many of them got just as disrupted in 2020 as anybody else.
When we opened up our office in New York 2 years prior to that, I set up video conference because we still had to work. Because we were still
you at least had these 2 offices now that you needed to stay in contact with.
And sometimes a sales rep in New York would need to use one of my sales, PEs, we call them product engineers, with the client. And so we would go in a conference room, and then they would be in a conference room. And so it would be virtually there. So we started playing with that. Oh my God, the adoption was so hard to have anybody, the sales reps, everybody hated it. But before COVID hit, our company was using video quite a bit, which really worked out, because when it hit, everybody works at home. I mean, it was crazy.
But so you had started, at least before this all hit, there was at least, and I guess in some ways, the timing's pretty perfect that you had this. So at least it was forcing the company to interact in some ways, because you had these 2 offices now that were starting to have to interact, where they're both in the offices, but different location offices. So now you had this kind of 2 satellites having to work together.
It gave us a leg up on being able to work with video conference, and our conference rooms already were outfitted with it. So that was easy. But remember, we're still at my front desk is, the office manager, and there's a back exit through, and if people would like to leave at 4:30 sometimes, and she'd find out, and she'd come into my office and say, hey, Richard left 30 minutes early. Do you want me to chase him down? I mean, that's what we're talking about, right?
That's the culture.
Show up at 9:05 and leave at 4:55.
Yeah.
That's the sign of somebody that really doesn't want to be there.
Okay.
That's what it was before. And then
that's what it was. Then COVID hits, kaboom.
And then COVID hits, and I don't know how long was it, 8 months that I mean, you couldn't go back in the office.
It's like a blur.
I literally, I jumped on I bought a big boat. Me and my wife went up and down the Florida coast, and I got a hotspot,
Okay.
and I
Just
worked on the
worked
boat.
from the boat.
Well,
Why not?
why not?
What else are you going to do? You can't go into your office.
Yeah, and then one of my employees said, they wanted out of New York. They're sick of it. They wanted to move to the state of Washington. Now, this person's been working with me for 12 years. Her position.
So that was so in some ways now this thing dynamics are starting to change little by little here, because now you're like working from a boat, because it's like, well, I mean, what other option do I have? I can't do anything. You have this person in New York that's been with the company for a while that's like, I don't really want to live in New York.
Right.
I want to live in Washington, which
can I do the same thing? Can I do the same thing I'm doing now, but from a different spot?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Why not? Because
what else are we going to do? And at the time, I mean, I remember at the time we didn't know, like,
I wasn't thinking what's
on the other side of this.
Right. We kept on saying this is the new normal. Remember,
it was. Everybody said that. That was the term. Everybody's like, well, this is the new normal. It was kind of like nobody was thinking what's after this.
It never crossed my mind when somebody would ask me those questions that I would say, well, what happens in 3 months when everybody has to show up at 9 o'clock again? Because it wasn't on my radar. I don't even know why.
No, things were just literally so crazy that I think at the time it was everything was so disrupted.
We didn't know if anybody would survive, I guess, right?
I mean, there were times where I think it was like everybody's like, maybe we're all going to die and it's going to be the end of the world anyway. So I mean, it really was a very confusing time for everybody.
So I had my director of operations. He was on his third kid now and living in Orange County, because I brought him in. I forced him to move there.
Okay.
Very expensive. And he said, and I said, guys, you're not locked here. He drove out to Florida, bought a house, big house for his kids, and has another kids in a perfect community. I told my partner the same thing. He moved to Texas and bought an 8,000 square foot house.
Okay.
I'm all
now, like in the midst of this, people are going, hey, since all bets are like, let's just figure out what makes sense.
Yeah. There's still the people that are, local. They like living there. The ones from New York and this and that.
But the ones that wanted to spread out a little bit. Others started going, forget this. I'm going to go. I didn't really want to be here in the first place.
Yeah. And so, well, here I am. The leadership is all over the U.S. and but we're getting things done. I mean, through necessity.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. Not only didn't we skip a beat, but something dramatic happened. Our clients that used to require face-to-face no longer required that. We started getting clients from everywhere. I have a meeting with a CEO, and there's his big old deer head back here and his rifle, and I could look through his window, and he's casually dressed, and he's given me a $500,000 account, which have never happened before. He has no expectations of me flying there, doing dog and pony show. So all of a sudden, our market opened up, and we got busy. We got busier because we would no longer need.
Well, because the funnel opened. All of a sudden, it was like, well, now these former kind of like constraints we had are gone.
We never reopened the office in New York. There was no need, because those people that work there, they were more productive at home. And the few that didn't like New York, one left there. I wasn't doing the travel anymore. So now we still got a little. Now today we have a little WeWork because there's two people there, and they want to see each other every now and then. And they want to come together and they'll plan maybe, this Wednesday, let's go there and work together.
But before we get into this, the WeWork piece, I'm curious, and listening to the journey is fascinating. And I hope as people listen and watch this, it helps understand the complexity of some of this stuff. Because I think sometimes you read headlines, you read these things, and you just don't really understand all that's going on. So the whole company gets disrupted. Things kind of go all over. You're not necessarily thinking about what's on the other side of this. When did all of a sudden you get to a point where you're like, oh, okay, we are on the other side of this, and now there's things we didn't think about or that we need to start thinking about again? When did that start kicking in?
So it was very slow, because as you were allowed to go back in the office, the few people that really wanted to go in because they got a kid at home or a spouse or a small apartment.
Or some people just wanted the routine. It was just I love it. I love getting up and I go in and I do my thing, and that's it.
So it just kind of it was automatic. So there was no rule. Nothing came down from me or management says we need to do anything different, because nothing was broken. I mean, we did have some pretty strict rules saying that you had to be available.
Sure.
If you're going to be, but that was
we never had to formalize policy. You didn't necessarily have to formalize it through policies or things like that. You just kind of adapted. It was kind of like, well, all right, things are kind of changing again, and we'll do it and take it as it goes.
Right. But we're dealing with half the employees wanting it to be the same again, and wanting me to encourage or force everybody to come in because they didn't like the half office. And they're so,
this story is extremely familiar for a lot of not only senior leaders in companies, but even just managers of teams, where they start to go, now I've got this weird dynamic with the team where I've got some people now who really want to be back, but they also want everybody else to be back, because it feels kind of weird when they're back, but not everybody's there. They kind of miss what they had before, and it's not there. Then you've got this other group of people that are like, I'm not interested in that. And you're kind of stuck in the middle of going,
right.
How do we navigate this?
So the biggest change happened. We didn't lose anybody or need to hire anybody during the pandemic. So, fortunately, our business was good. We didn't have to lay anybody off, and certainly didn't have to hire anybody. Now we need to hire. Now, the big questions we had, me and the managers or directors, who's going to do this? It's like, okay, we don't want to hire somebody remote sitting somewhere, because culture, how do we know they're working? There's so much nuance when somebody.
Well, because your employee base before was pretty consistent. I mean, like you said, you hadn't lost people, you hadn't hired people, so you kind of knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody as a small enough company.
And then we got the ones that are working at home. We got the ones working at home. We got the ones that moved and are working at home, and we have the ones going back to that single office.
Yeah. Yep. And you all knew each other's kind of flows and how things worked. It was just like, we know how this all works.
Yeah.
Okay. But now you're talking new blood, and you're like,
wait a second. I mean, how are we going to do this? And first of all, the person that's going to be training this person, they're not even in the local office, but we need to make sure we hire somebody to come in for accountability, because as managers, I mean, if I'm going to hire somebody new, I need to see them. I need to see them face to face, and it's building that. It's the things you learn about them when you go out to lunch together. It's all the nuances of that is important, I think. So what we did is my director of operations and I, since I was out in Florida on the boat and he moved out here, I said, okay, let's create gravity. What's that, Nick? So let's just make people want to move here.
Okay.
Let's get an office and make everybody jealous. One of the guys from New York, he's all like, Nick, are you, he's my director of marketing. He likes to be close to me, I suppose. So direct influence, we work together. He relocated. That's one.
Okay.
We put out an ad. I said, okay, we get an office. Now because we need to hire a couple new project managers and a SDR. Let's hire locally here. The job market in Orange County is a little bit tough to do it.
I would imagine.
And people were applying from, one of them was from Tennessee. We said, you have to relocate. This is an in-office job. So we got a really nice office in downtown, a beautiful view. And yeah, we have 7 people here now in a period of about a year and a half post-COVID. And, you know, we have some flexible, we created a hybrid, best of both worlds, but you have to be here. And we pick days so that everybody feels, so we have a full office a few days a week, but we have the flexibility of working at home, but still, while they're, you know, still in their first or second year, I guess we have, I hate to say control, but we know, we can see their demeanor, we can feel if they're happy at their work. It's
yeah.
I can't explain it. It's so,
well, no, and so this one,
I'm afraid of hiring. I'm afraid of hiring remotely.
Yeah,
for some positions. For some others, I think I would be.
And this is where I want to dig into some of this, because I think this is the challenge that a lot of organizations are faced with right now. And what many of the things they're struggling with is exactly what you just described. It's this intangible, hard thing to really kind of put your arms around, of like getting to know the person, figuring out who they are, how they fit in. And I think also there's a lot of things too that play into this equation, even in terms of like tenure, not necessarily with the company, but like from a career standpoint. You know, there's certain people who they've been doing it forever and they know what they need to do. And then there's other people who might be newer in their career and they need a little more guidance or, you know, discipleship in some ways, because they just are like, I don't know what to do if somebody's not helping me with that. And I know a lot of organizations that have wrestled with, we don't really know how we can possibly do that without having a local office space. And I think that's some of the challenges that a lot of organizations still wrestle with today, which is why I think we see some of this battle back and forth with companies trying to make a one-size-fits-all solution to a really, really complicated problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine a person growing and learning about the company and how to do their job as well if they were as remote than if they were in with their peers and talking about the challenges and stuff. Because when you're remote, you don't have spontaneous conversations, right? I'm not going to call you up on a video and say, hey, what do they call that? They called it water. What is it? The
water cooler conversations.
Water cooler conversations, right? I mean, some of the best things happen there. I mean,
so I told you we were going to go back and forth a little bit. So I would challenge that. However, I think it goes back to, and this is where every company has to figure out how it works in their organization. Because like I personally, like with my teams and teams I've worked with over the years, we have all those digitally. Like we'll spontaneously jump on a call and do stuff like that. We have video messaging apps where we'll shoot ideas back and forth, but it's part of the culture we've created. And in many ways, it's like, well, it's my comfort zone. So I know how to do all these things in wildly creative ways, which again, it just affects it. So I've seen it where it's not impossible to do, but it's extremely challenging and it requires a level of intentionality. And I think sometimes organizations are like, that's not our sweet spot. That's just not the way we operate.
So I'll tell you, we tried to have the in the midst of COVID, we'd have mandatory all hands share what you're doing this Friday at our happy hour video, right? And that was really fun. A few times, some people just loved it. Other ones were like,
some people hate it.
I got to be on this call. I'm not going to talk. I can't wait till it's over. But it got forced and old. What I have learned in my department, so I deal more on the sales side, and we have the project management and developer side. Myself and my sales manager, we've really focused on trying to foster that. We have our Friday call, which is kind of non-business, or maybe it's more strategic business. And sometimes we never get to the topic. We just talk about the crazy customer stuff. And it's taken a long time for that to turn into something that is genuine, that I know that people look forward to, myself included. But that's top down, and it has to be driven. We try really hard to remove ourselves as top down rather than, and trying to get that. And we do have the Slack channels, all kinds, the general, we got the East Coast, we got the West Coast ones, and, and people will post things and, funny things and stuff. So that is the culture in the community now. I think the water cooler talk I was talking about is the cross-departmental, some of the things that you would probably never, just wouldn't end up with that conversation because it's business and it's cross-departmental and it's an aha. It's like, oh, is that really just those nuanced things?
Well, and I think, again, what my experience has been, because I have run completely remote for many years. And I think one of the things, because I have those all the time, but I have to be the one driving them. So I'm the one setting those things up. I'm meeting with people cross-functionally all the time. I intentionally pepper my calendar with stuff. And a lot of times it's not only when I have a meeting, it's just catch up. And people who work with me know Christopher's going to set up virtual coffee with you. And you might be like, what are we going to talk about? It's like, I don't know. We'll just see. But it requires a level of intentionality. But I know that for some people, it's not their comfort zone. And it's a lot of work. It's honestly a lot of work. And I think that's where I've observed a lot of companies do struggle with this, because it's like, well, but how do we do that when people don't engage with that, or they don't take that kind of proactive intentionality to it? And it's like, in sometimes those cases, that's where you have to say, I don't know that this person can really function as a fully remote employee, because they struggle with being able to do some of that stuff. And that's one of the funny things I often find when I engage with people, is they assume that because I have found myself to be extremely successful being completely remote, that I think everybody should. And I'm like, there is a skill set and a level of discipline and accountability that comes with it, that it's not for everybody. It's really not for everybody.
I wonder if it's generational. Well, no, I shouldn't say we're mostly younger. No, there's some. Oh, it took some of my my more senior people, administrative people. I think for them it was much more challenging, because
I'm sure
they want the people there, and this is so.
It's so counterintuitive to how work ever was.
Yeah. And
it was just like, that's not where, and you talked about it backstage, where sometimes that generational piece creeps in, and the perception can be, because it's different, there's a lack of commitment. Or things where it's like, well, this person may not be committed to the organization. And again, it's misunderstandings of traditional operating mechanisms.
Yeah.
So how have you maintained some of that trust in the organization as things have adapted? Because now you've got some people in Florida. You've got kind of a cluster of people in Florida. You've got some people clustered in other areas, and then you've got people sprinkled throughout. How have you continued to kind of maintain that culture, that cohesion between the teams?
Well, the people that are sprinkled about are at the highest level of leadership.
Okay.
So they're vested. It's their job. They've got a lot on the line. It's not just to bring everybody together to foster that. There's only a few that I can think of that are outside of cluster that we have to keep an eye on. It's like hard to get a hold of sometimes. It's like, wait a second. I mean, maybe you went to the restroom, but that was an hour ago, and it's been another hour, and you're not responding to my ping, right? Yep. But for the most part, the ones that are scattered, they just happen to be the leaders in management of it. So that's just what they do. And the rest are clustered at the offices, and we're doing our best to encourage them to come in. A few more perks. Come in, everybody wants you in, and free pizza today. And, free pizza, people drive in for that. That still works.
It still works. That's where I was curious if because one of the things that you mentioned, I love the way you said it, gravity. You wanted to create gravity around the office.
FOMO, gravity. I call it gravity.
And have you found that has been effective in encouraging people to come?
Yes, but you need to maintain it. Because somebody comes into an office on a Wednesday and maybe somebody's traveling, one's out sick, somebody couldn't make it in because, we have exceptions. We have a contract. I got the contractor coming over the house today, so I'm not coming in today. And then you find that you're only one in the office that Wednesday. That's a suck of gravity pretty quickly. It happens a couple times. Now you feel like an idiot. Am I the only one that's coming in here and creating this gravity? So it takes some effort. It takes some effort. Like I don't, I'm no different. I'm so of course, being the CEO, I don't have to come in. I mean, I'm just as capable working anywhere. No, it wasn't.
Are you still working from the boat? Greg asked that question.
No, not anymore. I settled down, bought a house here.
Okay.
It was doable, but there were a lot of temptations when your boat is parked down in Key West. I'm just telling you. Yeah, my work got in the way of Key West plenty of times.
Okay.
What was I saying? But the reason I come into work is to contribute to the gravity, is because I want them to come to work, and I'm a piece of that. So I'm doing it on example. Sometimes that's the only reason I will come in. I don't have a lot of interaction. I'm in meetings. My door is closed sometimes the whole time because I'm in these meetings, but I'm there. And it's just that little bit of, I want you to be here and I want to encourage it. So I'm going to do it.
Okay. Well, and I think, one of the things that I really respect about how you've approached this, because again, I've worked with lots of organizations on this topic, and it is, hopefully people watching and listening are appreciating the fact there is so much complexity to this that often just is glossed over. But one of the things I appreciate about the way you're approaching the gravity in the office is you're modeling the behaviors you're hoping to see in others. And I think that's one of the big disconnects where I've seen in organizations, you'll have senior leadership go, this is what we want from everyone else, but then they're still working from the boat, type of a thing. And it's like, well, hang on a second. You're saying this is important to the culture, to the way we operate, but you don't seem to be taking that same thing seriously, but you actually are taking the same commitment and going, hey, I think there's something to it. And I think so. And it's so important to me that I'm actually going to, even though there's really not a purpose necessarily for me being here, I actually want to contribute to the gravity that we're creating here.
You know what? I hear you say that. It's not the only reason. I do enjoy coming in sometimes, getting away from the house and having this professional environment and seeing everybody. But, I did say I feel it's my obligation. It is. But as you said that, it's like, you
enjoy it.
I'm the guy that I like the 3-day minimum that we set up in
Florida. It works. It works. So so I'm curious, because have you encountered this yet? Because you've now started to open the gates of hiring, and I have lots of friends who are in the talent acquisition space, and this can be challenging. If you were to call me and say, Christopher, we'd love to have you come work for us, I would say, I have 7 kids. Sounds like an amazing opportunity. Florida ain't happening for me. There's just no way it can happen for me. And because of the way I operate, the way I do work, that style, because for you not only enjoy it, it's part of the gravity you create. For me, that's actually kryptonite. So what would be your kind of like lithium cell charger for me would be like completely depleting my battery. Have you had to encounter that yet, where you go, whoa, have you encountered it?
Not yet. But I would entertain it on certain positions. I think if I were to hire another, we call them sales reps, consultants, whatever.
Okay.
We don't do outside sales, but it's the person that if somebody calls us and they want to go through the journey of discovery of what it takes and everything, so sales rep, I don't think there's a benefit of bringing them into the office. So if you find a really good one,
Yeah.
because they're not going to be visiting clients or anything, and if they can do their job, and I'm assuming I'd hire somebody that is experienced and mature. If it was a junior that needed training, no. But if I'm hiring a pro, somebody that's great, I wouldn't hesitate. I wouldn't even make it a prerequisite. I think it's mostly the young. I'm allowed to say that. Or how about the junior, the entry level, the junior, the ones that we still need to mentor and guide and maybe project management needs to be close. I just think I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Yeah.
But we did have.
I think that what you're weighing in on though is some of the complexity behind this is that there's not, I think every company, a lot of companies, not every, but a lot of companies are looking for like the one size fits all answer. Like what is the policy? Do we allow remote work? Do we not? And I actually think that's a false, it's like, there's not an answer to that question because there's a lot of factors that you have to take into consideration.
Absolutely. And
we have a Gen Zer watching, and she said it's okay that you said young. You could say young. So you're good.
I used to think I was young. Anyway. I think having a flexible, because if I have somebody that's been with me for 15 years and they're all like, I want to get, I want to get out of this rat race, but I could do my work, right? You can move. Actually, we had one of the local juniors that we hired here in Tampa at his 1 year evaluation. He said, I want to move to New York. Can I work remote? But I will go into the WeWork to meet our other two guys there every now and then. We said, because we felt as though he is part of us, the culture, everything is there.
Yeah.
Now, if he finds another job and wants to go and pursue his career and everything, we always encourage that, right? You work here because you want to work here. But that was just an easy answer. We looked at each other as management saying, okay, we don't really have policy on this. This was part of gravity. We wanted him here very badly. Yeah. And now he asked to go. But we said, so we lost a little of the gravity here. So we're going to hire here. So one other thing I want to add to that.
Yeah.
When I consider this, I also want to consider the macro.
Yeah.
Are we a company that has people spread all over? Or are we a company that has our hubs and have some people around, which I think some people around is an advantage in different time zones. And I have some of them that will meet a client in Chicago because they're there.
They're close, right.
But I can't explain why I wouldn't feel like my company is as solid if I didn't have a couple of hubs where people show up every day. If it was just scattered, maybe that's not a rational thought. But to me, that doesn't feel like a company.
What's really interesting about that? So I had a deep conversation with somebody about some of the trends that are changing with work, and one of the things you just hit on right there is something that I think there's a generational component and there's just a societal component to this, where historically there was something about in the past, there was brick and mortar was like, it was a thing. It was like, that was a pinnacle of, it was a business milestone. It was like every business, that's a milestone that you have to hit. And there's something about it. And we talked about the fact that the digital age is challenging that. Now, I think there's still something to it, but it is challenging this idea that it's a prerequisite and that it's a mandatory thing. And that it's like, because I know a lot of people who they don't have a hub and they're wildly successful, but it's one of those like.
But is it a business or is it a virtual business at that point?
Well, and I think that's where the whole definition of what is a business anymore is changing.
Well, that's the first question. What's your business address? And when somebody asks that, they're asking, where do the phones ring to? Where does all the mail go to? And if you're just like, well, my bedroom, well, that's not a business. I mean, you could be doing 50 million in revenue in this verse. It's an old way of thinking.
But I think the challenge is technology is changing this so fundamentally where you can have an entire phone tree and an entire ecosystem set up, and it's literally all digital. It's almost like a digital copy of the real world. And I think that's where we're in this really weird environment where people are trying to figure out because I know lots of legitimate businesses that don't have a physical location, but they've got all the infrastructure, they've got a mail center, they've got like all this stuff, they've got a hub of stuff, but it definitely is a societal workplace shift that is happening that I think a lot of companies, just like you're wrestling through it, I think a lot of companies are wrestling through this as they're going, what does it really mean to be a business now? And how does that work?
I would bet that some of my most talented people, if we didn't have offices, if it was completely that, they would leave the company and seek to work somewhere because they don't
yes, I think you would definitely have some people who would.
And some very talented people. I mean, people I depend on. So, yeah.
And I think this is the real challenge that a lot of organizations are dealing with, especially because as the new generation, I'll say the new generation, we'll use the term young, right? As the younger generation's coming in, there is almost this rite of passage of like, well, I got my first job. I mean, I still remember the first company I got a job at where you went, it's like a thing. And for a lot of the younger generation, sometimes it's like, well, but that might not even exist anymore. Like, so what does that mean? And I think one of the things that, that you hit on that I loved that you talked about, some of the things you do that I think balances both the employee responsibility and the company responsibility. As I think of that example of the more junior person that after a year said, look, I really want to move to New York. Is this a thing? So two things. To the people who watch and listen to this, who are an employee, who go, I want I want flexibility. That person demonstrated they were willing to take the accountability that came with it. They said, I know what's expected of me. I know what I'm responsible for, and I know what I'm being held accountable to, and I'm committed to delivering on those things, albeit I'll do it from New York. So they weren't saying, can I just go to New York and kind of do my own thing? No, they did it. But I think the part for you on the company side that you did a phenomenal job with, that I think there's more opportunity for companies to do, you had that conversation and you created an environment where that person felt comfortable having that conversation, and you listened, and you didn't respond with, well, this is our policy. Our policy says no because blah, 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 blah. You actually listened to them as a human being. What are they trying to do? Do they understand? Where do we feel about this? And you worked with them. And I think that balance is what is often lacking in organizations where it's not working for them.
So I think, when he asked us that, and, we look at each other, me and my director of operations, and we're like, wow, what a question. I think that accountability, which you said, the things that we would expect of him, we knew immediately that we would get that. And that's why the answer was easy. If we were to think, well, wait a second, I mean, we're not even sure if, we feel like we have to hold him accountable here, right?
Sure.
What's it going to be like there? And I think he knew what he had to do, what his accountability was, and we trusted him. And that's why the answer was easy, even though we didn't have a policy for it, right? But that's what it is. The way you explained it is what happened in our head.
Yeah.
When we made that decision.
And I think that's the challenge that so many companies are wrestling through right now. I'm looking at some of the comments coming in, and Gene, brought up the fact that one of the challenges that I think a lot of organizations are struggling with, that even you described, that you have to wrestle with is, you have your more seasoned, your more senior folks that have demonstrated stuff. And so there's more flexibility, more opportunity for them to have some of that, where sometimes companies can fall short, which I think you demonstrated with this junior person who after a year said, hey, here's what's really important to me. And you went, okay, like, let's figure that out. Is some companies would just go, no, because policy says da, 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 da. And that can create this inequity in the system where somebody goes, so what? Like, if I just stick around for 5 years or I get to a certain title, then I'm allowed to. But if I'm crushing it at this role, like, I just arbitrarily can't because of adherence to some policy or deliverable. And I think the crux of what you're getting at, which I think is why it's working for you so well, is you're not trying to solve it through a process or a policy.
No.
You're actually doing the hard work of working with people and recognizing what the outcomes are that people need to achieve and going, we're going to figure out the best way to achieve those outcomes that meets people where they are while still achieving the outcomes. And it might look different, which I think sometimes companies are afraid to do that because they're like, well, but if we do this for Jill, what if Greg says, well, why does Jill get to and I don't? So let's just not do it for anybody.
Yeah, that's not right. No, I do recall us telling anybody that, they said they wanted to stay at home or anything. And we would say, okay, but you're going to have to work a little bit extra to demonstrate to us that you're doing everything that you would do here, because we can't see anything. We can't see what's going on. It'll take a little extra work for you. But if you could do that, that's all fine. So one of our jobs, I think, with the guy going to New York now is if we see anything different, the first thing as managers we would do to him and say, hey, this is different. It's not better. Let's figure this out if you want to do this. And that would be the right way to address that with him, to point it out and not wait.
Right. And again, it goes into some of the principles of all this stuff. I think it's timeless, good human-centered principles, which is when things aren't working, you engage in dialogue with people.
Right.
And you say, hey, like, let's talk about this. Like, what's going on here? Here's what we're seeing. Here's what we're observing. Help us understand what's going on your end. And you engage in the tough stuff of working through that and coming to a solution. One of the things you said, though, that I really want to reemphasize is I think sometimes people don't like to hear well, but if you're going to be remote, it's going to be a harder path. Like, there's going to be, and some people are like, well, that's not fair. And it's like, I can tell you as a remote employee, it is more work. It is more work. I have to be more disciplined. I have to be more visible. I have to be more intentional about everything so that people know who I am. I don't just disappear off into the ether, which as an introvert was a nightmare to build those skills, because I was like, I don't do this naturally. It would be way easier for me just to show up at a place and have people see me and go, oh yeah, Christopher, he's so nice. He's great. Like, it would be easier for me. It's a pain to have to schedule time and be vocal and be out of my way on top of things to do it. And sometimes people go, well, I don't want to have to do that. And I'm like, that's the reality of it. If you are going to be in this position, you're going to have to work harder to be present, to be visible, to be intentional, to be on top of people's minds. And sometimes people go, well, I don't want to do that. And to that, I go, then go into the office then. If that's not what you want to do, so be it. But then don't fight for the thing that actually you're not really willing to put in the fight for.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
So all of this, so first of all, Nick, I've really appreciated having this conversation, because I think, even just based on the comments coming in from stuff, I love just the raw nature of working through some of this. And I really hope that as people listen to this, one, if you are an employee that is frustrated with me, like, why does my company have it figured out? I hope it gives you greater empathy and appreciation for this is really hard stuff. I mean, it's really hard stuff. Every senior leader I've engaged with, they're trying their best. They're trying to figure it out. They're not trying to be draconian, force people. They're doing the best to figure out with what they're comfortable with and what they're doing. And I hope to the senior leaders who listen to it, I think they could learn a lot from you in terms of like, we don't know, but we're doing our best to keep people at the center of it and work through some of the messiness and maybe take some risks where we go, well, it might not be equal for everybody. And we might not have a specific HR policy that dictates every term and condition of how some of this stuff works, but we care more about the performance of our company and the happiness of our employees than writing a universal policy that pisses off half the people and isolates the other half and gets us nowhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't really have any other conclusion to this other than I've really enjoyed digging into this with you. And I hope this is a conversation that challenges people in what is often, in my opinion, just an oversimplified topic. People are just like, remote in office. Well, there's more to it than that.
There's a lot more to it than that. A lot more, and probably winding up pretty soon. But we didn't even touch on the fact of the peer-to-peer, the ones that come in the office, how they view their peers. Do they view them as not working as hard? I mean, keeping that cohesiveness together of two different groups of how they approach their work.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a big deal too. I mean, it's not accurate, just because somebody likes to come in the office, it doesn't mean the person that doesn't like to come in the office and set up a beautiful office in their home isn't working
committed
hard.
Right. And that proximity bias is a real thing that companies are having to wrestle with, where they're like, well, I like so-and-so.
Yeah.
Is it because of their performance or is it because they're closer to you?
Yeah.
And how do you balance that?
Yeah, right. Oh, the other way around. Is there a perception of the remote worker that without having the proximity of the bosses every day, they don't have the ability to suck up? Do they still say suck up? I don't know.
I think you could still say that.
Okay. I get myself in trouble with my, I'm off the email list and the memos. I don't get them all the time. Before I know it, my kids will tell me, say, Dad, you can't say that anymore. It's like,
no, but I think that's just it. And I think, it's wrestling through the complexity. And I think as leaders, having to constantly check yourself and go, hey, how am I making sure that I'm not showing preferential treatment because of my own personal biases towards, because I know I have to do that with the in-person folks. Like, I'm more digital and remote. So I'm constantly going, well, hang on. I need to make sure I don't have biases towards people who operate the same way I do. And the same is true with folks who are more comfortable with the in-person proximity thing, who love going out to happy hour and whatever. We're all wrestling through that same stuff.
I'll tell you though, that our annual reunite meetings are really enjoyed by everyone. It's mandatory. We fly everybody in and we all hang out and work in the office, mandatory for a week. Okay. And it's fun. Everybody loves it. It's so hard to work in an office where it's full because you walk
nothing
down,
gets done for that week.
I'm going to go down to the accountant's office because I got a request. So I'm going to do it. And I don't remember what the hell I was going to do because I've stopped 15 times.
Yep.
Now I know it's because everybody's new there for the week and stuff, but oh my gosh, you just, there's a conversation every 5 feet and it's loud and it sounds productive, but honestly, even for me, I'm all like, I couldn't do this. This wears me out. This is like, if I went, it looks like one of those Wall Street call centers or something. If I was there 10 hours a day with all that noise and stuff, it's like, I want to work at home.
You'd be stressed out and you get nothing done.
I want my dog sitting on my lap and stroking it, petting him as I'm doing emails. So we got a little taste of that once a year, but it's a lot of fun. It's just to get everybody back together again. But
well, and you know what? At the core of it, and I'll wrap on this. I think at the core of it, it's celebrating the diversity of how people are. Like, we're just so different. And instead of like pitting each other against each other and go, oh, you're that way, that's stupid, going like, we're different. And like, that's awesome. Like, we're learning from each other. We're figuring this stuff out and really focusing on those human relationships. And I think especially in the AI age where isolation and the ability to, I don't need to work with my team because I've got an AI agent that can basically be my peer. Why would I bother calling any of my friends? I can just work with this thing and never have to even lift my head up. I think really focusing on how do we foster strong, deep, meaningful connections between people is going to be essential. So, Nik, this has been even more fun than I anticipated when we were backstage. So I appreciate you making the time and coming on and just having this raw conversation with me. And genuinely appreciate it. And based on all the comments and engagement, I think everybody else enjoyed it as well. So thank you.
All right. And thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your week. And hopefully this has made you think, challenged you, and encouraged you along the way. We will see you on the other side.